As a physician, you have a holistic preventive approach to mental health. There was a study recently in September 2008 in the Science Daily that said that American children were 3 times more likely to be medicated than children anywhere else in the world. Could you comment on that?
Yeah, I believe it. I haven't seen that article. I need to look at that, but totally believable. It's probably even worse than that. I know that 90% of the Ritalin in the world is prescribed for American children.
90%?
90% of the world's Ritalin use is Americans, which only represent 4 or 5% of the world's population. Now that's good marketing. That's cunning. That's not brilliant. It's cunning. It's
unscrupulous.
Unscrupulous. I would say unscrupulous. Right. So, you know, we're all brainwashable. You know, we can be told something over and over and over again in a plausible fashion, and we'll believe it. So people tend to believe what's on television, what the advertising is, and what the doctors tell us to do, etc. And we get this message that if you are a fidgety child, or a little inattentive, or you're a daydreamer, or bored with boring stuff in school, and you act out a little bit, then all of a sudden you get a label of ADHD. People should read the ADHD Fraud, or Talking Back to Ritalin, or Ritalin is Not the Answer. That's on my bibliography. Those books are on my bibliography elsewhere. And find out that it's a myth. It's not really true. And so not only are kids being misdiagnosed, they are also therefore being treated for something that has another cause that they don't have. And the treatment of choice, quote unquote, is psychostimulants. It's the drugs that are based on the amphetamine molecule, dexedrine. So Adderall is 4 different kinds of dexedrine. It's amphetamine. You know, it's an illegal drug. You know, unless it's written by prescription by a physician, then it's legal. But Adderall is amphetamine. Ritalin is an amphetamine-like drug that has a molecular structure very similar to cocaine.
What I don't understand is these children are antsy and have too much energy, and then you give them an amphetamine type?
Isn't that interesting?
How does that calm them down?
Well, it doesn't calm them all down, but it does focus. It causes focus. If you ever take an amphetamine, I've never taken any or cocaine, but it focuses you. You are concentrating. You are less easily distractible. But it does have agitation effects, and it causes them to lose their appetite, so therefore the body shrinks or actually stops growing, including the brain stops growing, and long term there's evidence that people on these drugs actually have their brain shrink, so they're losing brain cells probably. So it causes growth retardation when people are on amphetamine type drugs of any type, whether it's methamphetamine, cocaine, Ritalin, or Adderall. And then of course Concerta is just the same as Ritalin except a different brand name. So these are psychostimulants on the basis of the amphetamine molecule, and they're all Schedule II drugs, which are the highest, the most dangerous, most addicting drugs.
Schedule II?
Schedule II is the most addicting and most dangerous drugs that can be prescribed. So that morphine is in that, and hydrocodone, OxyContin, is in the same category as Ritalin and Adderall.
Why are we medicating our children like that? Because they can't sit still?
Simple. That's a simplistic approach to something. And of course, there's reasons for kids being disruptive in the classroom other than the mythical ADHD. They may be sleepless at home, they might be malnourished at home, they might be abused at home, they might be watching too much television and video games, maybe violent video games, lots of flashing lights, using up brain chemicals that make algebra boring or English boring because they're watching all these R-rated movies and violent video games and wasting all their brain energy on gaming. And so they may have exposures to being bullying or any number of 1,000 things you can think of where they have dysfunctional, they're malnourished, their homes are toxic, and how can we expect kids to be, just sit nice and quiet and learn in a boring classroom? So the ADHD Fraud, I think, by Fred Bauman, a neurologist, outlines it quite well. There's definitely no blood test, no biopsy, no lab test, no x-ray that can diagnose ADHD.
There isn't?
It's guesswork. So if you had a child that fidgets, the first thing teachers think of, oh, I bet he's got ADHD. They send him to a physician in a 5 or 10 minute assessment says, well, I guess we have to trust the teacher on this one, and writes the prescription. That's kind of, and now they're on a road, on a gateway drug to cocaine and nicotine. Kids who've been on Ritalin are much more likely to eventually use cocaine or be smokers. They got that psychostimulant stuff, brain depletions of dopamine. That's where Ritalin and Adderall and Strattera work on the dopamine norepinephrine system, which are the psychostimulating, but they deplete the very brain chemicals that they're stimulating. And so now their brain, they're sort of in withdrawal, and they feel dead, and they need another stimulant, so they start using caffeine or nicotine or street drugs to take the place of the legal prescription drug, Ritalin.
What can we do to help these children?
There's lots of alternatives. The book called Ritalin is Not the Answer has a lot of advice on parenting. And nutrients are the key again here.
Okay.
Here they are. Since ADHD really was never described, at least not in any significant numbers, before 30 or 40 years ago. There was no such thing. When I was a kid, nobody had ADHD. Nobody even fidgeted. I don't know. Once in a while, if there was abused kids who acted out, but they never got labeled. And so they never got on drugs.
Nothing more harmful than the class clown, perhaps.
Yeah, the class clown or the daydreamer. The kid who's too smart, you know, he's just bored with what he already knows that stuff, or it's boring to him, and he fidgets or looks out the window or something like that. Now these kids are getting labeled with mental illnesses, but they're also kids are now malnourished and eating toxic food. They're on Diet Mountain Dew when they're 3. What do you expect? What do we expect for a brain that's getting poisonous, poorly nourishing substances? Then they're getting injections, vaccines that have mercury in them, and live viruses, and formaldehyde and aluminum in the vaccination substance. Those are all brain toxic substances. So that's a factor as well. So, and kids these days, average kid eats at a McDonald's type fast food restaurant 2 or 3 times a week, and some kids have a meal there every day. So what do we expect? We're going to have brain damaged, brain malnourished kids who are going to be inattentive, hyperactive, rebellious, and if you put any 3 of those factors together, you're going to have someone who qualifies for ADHD diagnosis instead of abuse, being bullied at home, being malnourished, too much, 8 hours of video games, watching 4 R-rated violence movies on the weekends. What do we expect? We're going to have some dysfunctional kids out there that don't deserve to be on an addicting substance.
Thank you.
You're welcome.